Hi, my name is Jane Carroll, and I'm an artist. I started painting in watercolor fairly late in the game compared to when a lot of other people start painting or doing art. I really was raised in a family full of love, but not full of art and not full of music. So it happened in about 2006. I'll try to make this long story short, but I had a diagnosis of a pretty bad cancer and with a pretty crummy prognosis. And after about the first year after that, when it looked like I was going to be living for a while, my husband Ted said, "So what do you want to do now that you've always wanted to do?" And I don't know where this came from, but I literally just said, watercolor. And I don't know where it came from. I had never painted, I had never done anything like that. But that's what popped out. And then I was encouraged by that very same husband and my family when they purchased paints and brushes and a gift certificate for art lessons. To start that journey, it took me a year to be brave enough to even start that. But that sort of just started a nice, long journey, figuring out how to respond to that little whisper that happened. And I took it from there. I read books, I talked to people, I played with paints as best as I could. I tried things. I looked at Pinterest and collected oodles and oodles of examples of things that made me go, when I looked at them, and I yearned to do those same things, to create those kinds of images that made at least me go. Sometimes I've succeeded, many more times I have not, but I've learned that that is a big piece of being a creative person. In watercolor, there's a nice mix of science and art. There's a nice mix of, learning about pigments and what they do and how they respond and different kinds of paper and how it's made. And I love all that stuff. I love learning about the stuff, the brushes and what kinds of brushes make what kinds of marks and, the whole business of how much water do you need and how much pigment do you need and how wet the paper needs. So there's all of that. And I loved learning about that. And I feel like I have tucked a lot of that away in my back pocket and I'm still learning. But there's another whole piece to watercolor that I think makes it what's calling to me. In watercolor, if you forget to, it's called leaving the light. If you forget to leave the light, and it's like, ooh, isn't that a wonderful analogy? If you forget to leave the light, you really can't get it back that easily. So light is really important. And so it leaves you vulnerable. Watercolor leaves you vulnerable to making lots of errors, lots of mistakes, and lots of things that you can't control. I have had to come to terms, which happens many times, so I never really come to terms with it, about just being comfortable with seeing where it leads me, figuring out what to do in a painting when what I plan to do is not going to happen. So I have to, as somebody said, I have to be prepared to be unprepared and just go with it. So there's just that whole mystery part of watercolor that I know is right for me, because that's stuff I'm working on in other realms of my life. I'm definitely inspired by nature, first and foremost. Many of my paintings you'll see are derived from the natural world. I live in the middle of the city, and yet I'm a big nature nerd, so that is a little bit of a challenge. So I will go out to nearby places, whether it's Cedar Hill Cemetery or Elizabeth Park or the banks of the Farmington River, and just try to take it in. So a lot of times it's things or views that inspire me, but it can also be just colors, just that I'm somewhere and I'll just see, I'll just notice. The other day I was driving in a car, and thankfully Ted's driving because I'm always looking out the window, which is not great for the driver. And we were driving down Route 6, and there was this highway median filled with these trees of all different green colors. And right in front of them there was this big, stocky, pretty much dead tree, just the skeleton of a tree, and it was in soft grays. And I remember saying in my head, oh my God, I just love those colors. And of course, the next trick for me is to just, when I have a chance, remember those colors and find a place to use those colors. So plenty of things out in nature, the way the light hits something, the way something's in shadow. I like to actually zoom up close to things in nature, so then rather than paint a whole tree, find a little chunk of the tree that is appealing to me. But I'm also realizing I am inspired by other things. Sometimes I'm inspired by a turn of phrase, like a piece of a poem. For years, I have been sitting in the pews at church with the hymnal, and I will be either maybe singing the hymn we're supposed to be singing or distracted and flipping through the hymnal, and I have noticed that different little chunks of hymns just stand out to me, and they become inspirations. I always felt like you're supposed to paint first and then get your title, and I'm realizing for me it isn't always that way. I find the concept or the words or the turn of phrase, and that's going to be my painting. And I did that during the early part of the COVID stay at home. I did painting hymns from home, and I just made a list of just beautiful turns of words or fragments and just came up with a painting. So that was inspirational to me. So the inspiration is all around. Sometimes it's a photo I've taken, but what's changed in me since I fell into this art path is that I feel like I'm constantly on the lookout for those inspirations. One of the things I am learning, I feel like I've bumped up against it enough that I know this is a truth in creating, is that there is a real connection between creating and fear, or creating and courage. I mean, you can look at it either way. And I would say that from the get-go, my story was one on creating and fear. Like I said, it took me a year before I used the gift from my family to go out to Jerry's Artorama and buy some paints and some brushes. And it took me another year before I signed up for a course. And because I was just afraid, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. People are much better at this than I am. I'll never be good. I remember the first class I took at West Hartford Art League. It was this really nice guy named Brian who taught it, and it was my first time ever doing this. And I had a picture I was ready to paint. I had sketched it out carefully, and then I had my paints made up, and I'm just staring. I'm looking at it. I am not touching the brush. I am not touching the brush. And I just kept looking and thinking, and just afraid to touch the paper. He came up behind me and he said, "Put some paint on the darn paper." The spiritual part of art is now becoming to me hearing these whisperings to just do it, just try it, just go there. And learning that it's really my job in faith to say yes. So I would say to people that feel that tug in any way. One person said to me, now I'm retired, and I don't know know, I feel like I've always wanted to do dance, but I feel like I'm too old and I've never done it, and I just want to whisper, just do it. Just don't say no, say yes, and then figure out how you go about it after you say yes. And I have created paintings of my own that I go, oh, I love that painting. It doesn't happen that often, but it doesn't matter. It's being open to being creative, and here's the big learning for me sort of recently. It's not just, it's being creative to that piece of art or dance or music or pastels. It's also, you're creating that piece of art, but you're also creating a life. You're always creating your life. And I believe I'm supposed to be saying yes to a lot of things that are presenting themselves to me. Don't always do it, but I know that's the right answer. About a year ago, the same person who said, I've always wanted to be a dancer, but I don't know if I can do it. And then I met another person who said, I wake up with pictures in my head and I feel like I have to paint them. And I had this little seed of an idea that I think these are people like me who are trying to figure out about being creators and how to do it with each other. So I put the word out to like 2 other people. Would you want to just get together, once in a while, and we'll just be brave with each other and create things? And little by little, the group grew, and it was a church-related group. People who had either always done art but haven't been doing it in a while and had wanted to get back to it. People who had had big losses in their life, huge, sad losses, and just felt like, I think this might help me. So we made this little band. We call ourselves the Artful Friends, and we started to meet in the art room at church because there were sinks and tables. And we just would get together and talk for about a half an hour and drag out all our art stuff, and somebody would be using crayons and I'd be doing my watercolors, somebody would be playing with fibers and somebody else with watercolor, just all kinds of things. And having great conversations, sometimes about art, a lot of times about life. And then when COVID hit and church shut down, we lost each other for a month or so, and then we thought, we need to do this. So we started to meet around each other's dining room tables. It's been a very powerful group for all of us. So this painting here was done in plein air, right there on the spot, in Cedar Hill Cemetery, which is pretty near my house. I love going there, and I have sat in this meadow many times and painted many paintings from this same spot. In this particular painting, you have to kind of look in close, but there's about 3 or 4 deer, and they're kind of munching away, and they always show up in Cedar Hill, and they always give me joy. And it reminds me like of the gifts that that creative journey has given me, of all the times that I've been out there sitting somewhere in nature, and I am lifted. Literally, I feel like a little physical lift when I see stuff like that. The first time I ever painted in plein air, I had gone on a sort of a trip with some friends to Sedona, and we were all just sort of new into painting in real life, and we found a little park, a roadside park near a bubbling brook, and we all set up apart from each other, and I had I'm feeling self-conscious because I'm painting outdoors in front of possibly people, and I'm painting away, and literally the brook is bubbling. Fish were leaping, birds were twittering above my head, and then a butterfly came down and landed on my palette of paints and sat right next to the cadmium yellow for about 5 minutes. I think of it now, and it's just, I loved that. I loved that. I love being able to be there for that, and I realized that painting outdoors does that. I've heard from so many people that once you do that, once you kind of say yes to that universe or that Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it, that other things will present themselves to you if you're looking and you're open to them. you won't be great right away. It's like, so what?